Allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Landon Tucker.
My name is Jacob Rubenstein.
My name is Justin Woodcock.
And my name is Arhan Jain.
And this is our group. And our experiment is taking two greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane, and see how both will affect the pH of water.
So the first equation is carbon dioxide plus water, and that produces a carbonic acid.
And the next one is methane, so we have CH4 plus H2O, which ends up making CO and 3 H2s. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, so I have here a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder, and I will be pouring 400 milliliters, so 104 times, into the graduated cylinder, which I will then pour into the 1 liter bottle. We now have the 400 milliliters of distilled water in the 1 liter cup, and Arhan will now be testing the pH of the distilled water with the pH meter.
And I'm placing the pH meter in the water.
Just let it go for a second. And it looks like it levels out at 6.98 pH. So that's the starting pH of the distilled water we will be using.
Alright, so we're now going to be creating an airtight seal on the bottle with some paraffin. So I'm just going to take the paraffin and basically create ourselves a seal here. And then we're going to take the tube from the beaker which the gas will be traveling through. Create a small hole. And then we're going to take some extra paraffin. Just wrap it around this hole to make sure no gas escapes. And we're ready to go.
This is the part where we have the CO2 reaction. We have a flask full of Alka-Seltzer tablets and 400 milliliters of water. I'm going to put this water into this flask where bubbles will be created, and we'll go through this tube right here and create the CO2 gas, which will end up being measured by the pH meter over there. I'm going to put a stopper so none of the gas will escape. So this is the CO2 reaction that is taking place right now. We have the water reacting with the Alka-Seltzer tablets, which is going through this tube and going through this little straw right here, and is creating bubbles.
Okay. So the CO2 reaction has been completed. It took approximately 8.5 minutes. So I will now measure the pH change of the water with the CO2 now. So I will remove the paraffin.
And I'll get the pH meter out. Here you go, Jacob. Oh.
1 second, I'm just a little tough. Here we go. We're gonna remove this. We'll take the pH meter
And here
and we'll stick it in the water to see what it gets to.
it looks like the pH has reduced a little.
It's starting to decrease.
Okay, so there was a significant reduction in pH, and the pH looks to be about 4.33.
We're on to the second half of the experiment. We're going to be using methane instead of CO2 this time. And we've got another 400 milliliters of distilled water. So we're making our airtight seal with the paraffin. And we're then going to insert the tube, create our seal again, And I will now turn on the methane.
So right now the methane gas is going into the distilled water, and methane and CO2 are both greenhouse gases. So we are going to see which one has a greater effect on pH.
Now we are turning off the methane gas.
It has been approximately 4 minutes. The amount of methane being into the water was faster than the CO2, so that's why we're doing half the amount of time that we did for the CO2. Okay, so now Arhan's taking off the paraffin, and I'm grabbing the pH meter, in which I will measure the pH change of the water. Okay.
Okay. Now Jacob's putting the pH meter in the water, in the distilled water, to determine how much of a reduction in pH there was.
Okay, so after measuring the pH, there was a little decrease,
Slight reduction.
of approximately 0.4 pH, but nowhere near as much of a decrease as with the CO2. Okay, for the results of this experiment with carbon dioxide, the initial pH of the distilled water was approximately 6.98, and after combining the water with the carbon dioxide, the pH was reduced to approximately 4.33, becoming more acidic.
And so during the second half of the experiment, we used methane to test if it would affect the acidity of water, and it went from a 6.98 to only a 6.51, having virtually no change in the pH at all.
Thus, for the effects of this, it can be seen that carbon dioxide has a much greater effect on the pH of water than that of methane, as seen by the fact that the pH of carbon dioxide changed by approximately 2.5, while the pH change for methane was not even 0.5.
Now, as Jacob stated before, methane basically does not have any effect on the acidity of water, so we can determine that CO2 is the more potent of the two when it comes to water, which means that any acid rain created by CO2 is going to have much more of a detrimental effect on environmental factors than acid rain created by any sorts of methane. However, methane is a more potent heat-trapping gas, so in a sense it is a stronger greenhouse gas in the ozone, but for the purpose of this experiment, CO2 is the stronger of the two gases and makes water more acidic.
Thank you.
Thank you.